Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, November 4th, 2022, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, but we are 4 days away until the 2022 midterm elections. This video is going to be talking about the 538 Senate forecast that now has the Republican Party at a 55% chance of victory to the Democratic Party's 45%. Now, this is not the result that Democrats were hoping for and not the result that we could have expected a month, 2 or 3 months ago. Following the Dobbs decision from the United States Supreme Court, it looked like the nation was shifting on a social issue on the issue of abortion. But as we've gotten closer to the midterms and as gas prices have started to rise and as inflation has started to increase, we've started to see a recentering on economic progress and inflation as an individual issue for Americans across the country, and consequently, the Democrats are starting to decrease in terms of their chances at victory. This 55% advantage for the GOP is significant because it's the first time in a long time that Republicans have been in the advantage on the 538 forecast. In fact, from July 25th onward, the Democrats had the advantage on this exact forecast. But now, the Republicans have reclaimed that with just 4 days to go until the midterm elections. We've talked about how the Republican Party would need to really turn around the direction of the election in order to reach the point they are today. We mentioned that a month ago when we talked about Democrats being at a point where sometimes they were up exactly a month ago today, with Democrats at 66% in terms of their chance of victory, coming off of their peak of 71%. And at this point in time, we were a month away until the midterm elections. Then the scandal broke about Herschel Walker. Then came all the scandals that broke about other candidates across the United States, and it looked like the Republican Party was doomed to fail in this midterm election, at least when it came down to the Senate elections. And we mentioned that a lot would have to change between October 4th and November in order for Republicans to win. And guess what? A lot has changed. And what exactly has actually changed the trajectory of these races? Well, in some states in specific, for instance in the state of Arizona, where Blake Masters now has a 36% chance of victory, the Libertarian candidate Mark Victor has dropped out of the race and endorsed Blake Masters. Or we head over to the state of Georgia, where Herschel Walker's scandals are not hurting him nearly to any extent. In fact, he is polling better than before. Obviously, I don't think he's been boosted by the scandals, but I don't think they've been to his detriment to the extent that we might think. Dr. Oz is rising in viability and popularity in the state of Pennsylvania. John Fetterman's debate was abysmal, and it's clear that that was the turning point in favor of Dr. Oz, and now Dr. Oz has a 47% chance of victory, down from what was at a different point in time in a very low point at a 17% chance of victory. Very, very interesting. You take a look across the nation as well, not only on the Senate level, but also on the governor level. Republicans locking up Florida, locking up Georgia, locking up Ohio, locking up states all across the nation, making Oregon competitive. Nevada gets more Republican. Wisconsin gets more Republican. Looking at it, Ron Johnson and Mandela Barnes were 50-50 just 2 months ago. What happened? A slew of ads came in, tens of millions of dollars poured in for the GOP, and its effects paid off. In the state of Nevada, Catherine Cortez Masto, the Democrats, falling and faltering when it comes down to early voting numbers. Now she has just a 41% chance of victory. Donald Duck, surprisingly enough, getting a surge in terms of polling data across the state, was at a point where he was going to lose this state. No doubt about it. Now there is significant doubt about it. A consideration the Democrats might lose this state altogether. So everything that could have gone right for the GOP has gone right, and we are 4 days away. Not much is going to change between now and Election Day, simply because there is so little time. So how did we reach this point? Well, looking at where we were with President Biden's approval rating, we've reached a point back in early October where President Biden's approval was actually narrowing up, a dramatic narrowing up from what was down 20 points for President Biden back at the end of July. And this was around the same time that Republicans were still in the advantage when it came down to the Senate odds. But as President Biden's approval rating improved, so did Democrats' performances across the United States. And around early October, we reached a point where President Biden was down just negative single digits across the nation. And it was at this point in time where we thought inflation was going to get better, where we thought gas prices were going to continue improving. But instead, the opposite happened. It sort of reversed itself. Gas prices started to rise again, inflation started to increase, and the American public was simply not having it. In addition to that, the Dobbs mirage, as some people call it, meaning the point in time where we thought the Dobbs decision was going to trounce any other issue, or at least contend with the issue of inflation, the issue of gas prices, we found that earlier on in this race, that was a fact. The Democrats were in a better position following the Dobbs decision, and every single data point can prove it. But now today, Democrats stand at a point where they are down nationwide by 3 points because the Dobbs decision was struck down and put into law, or broke down law, in June 2022, which meant there were exactly, or nearly, 5 months until the November election for the Republican Party to shape the narrative. When you talk about media mentions, when you talk about the way that the public's narrative was shaped by politicians, journalists, citizens, etc., it all came down to an increase in discussion in crime, an increase in discussion in inflation, an increase in discussion about Biden's disapproval, about Biden's failures, about Biden's inability to win over the nation. Does that help the Democratic Party? Absolutely not. And when the media is really building up this narrative, and it's not the media's fault, in essence, for the Democratic Party's inability to win this race. These 2022 Senate elections were in a better position. There is clearly a correlation between the approval rating of the president and gas prices and inflation, and thus, media coverage is going to cover what becomes more important to voters. If gas prices are going up and voters are more worried about that, they are going to cover that. But when they were more worried about abortion, or at least it was a more hot-button issue, that was what the topic of discussion was about. So we really cannot blame any type of source or bits of information. Yes, on one front, the media has a responsibility to accurately cover what is going on in this country, and I think, in a way, some media sources do not do that. I've been very vocal about that. But at the same time, that is not on them. The election performance should not, and truly is not, the responsibility of the media when they go into what they are reporting on. In most cases, when it comes down to at least nonpartisan mainstream media sources, I truly do not believe, and I mean this, I truly do not believe that they are going into this with at least intentional intent to mislead the American public. I do think that what we see from the media shapes the narrative, and it has caused voters to think about issues differently. When you see nonstop coverage about gas prices and inflation, you are going to conflate that with President Biden, and thus you are going to disapprove of him and the Democrats altogether. And now, today, Republicans are up 3 points on the generic ballot on Real Clear Politics. They're up 1 point on the 538 generic ballot. Altogether, Republicans have reclaimed a lead that they once lost and now have it in the Senate forecast. And when it comes down to a breakdown on individual states, you start to see a map similar to the one that I have presented you. My prediction from November 2nd, just 2 days ago, I made this prediction and published it because it was a very interesting one, to say the least. I mean, looking at where we are today, looking at where the American public is today, the Democratic Party is in a significantly worse position, and that cannot be overstated. The Democrats would have done better a month ago, and I stand by that entirely. I stand by that 100%. But it doesn't matter, because that was a month ago. What matters is the nowcast. What matters is where we are today, and Democrats, quite frankly, are down. The losses for Democrats and the loss in terms of control of the Senate is following down in the states of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Nevada. The only one flipping on my map personally is Nevada. On 538s, it's Georgia. Pennsylvania, in fact, is going blue, flipping towards the Republican Party. Georgia and Nevada. Pennsylvania flips blue. My map, Pennsylvania stays red, Georgia stays blue, thus no need to cancel each other out. Neither of them are changing parties. One state is, Nevada is going red. I see this map and I tell myself that the Republican Party is on track for a pretty significant overtaking of Congress. I think more so in the House than in the Senate, because what we have seen with a number of these lackluster candidates is that the Republican Party is finding it unable to make major moves across the country. I remember my map after Glenn Youngkin's victory back in 2021, and it reminds me a lot of what we would have seen for the GOP should they have played their cards correctly. Let me give you this alternate timeline in about a minute. They run Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania, and he's the nominee. Pennsylvania, lean red, in fact, probably likely red, right? They run a good candidate in the state of Ohio, likely red, no need for any money there. In Wisconsin, they run a better candidate, not Ron Johnson, somebody better. And also, maybe a worse Democrat in this circumstance. North Carolina is the same. Florida is the same. Georgia would be someone who's a statewide elected official, or potentially even a former candidate, not Perdue, not Loeffler, but Doug Collins, someone who, in essence, deserves another chance at the Senate based off of his electoral performance in head-to-head matchups between other candidates. In Arizona, they didn't nominate Blake Masters. They had Doug Ducey in this race. In Nevada, it's the same thing. In the state of New Hampshire, you would have Kristen Sununu. What would have gone right in these circumstances would be running the right candidates for the Republican Party and choosing the ones, at least not even running them, because many of them did run. Remember, Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania nearly won that nomination, but actually winning the nomination, actually endorsing and supporting these Republicans that were running in these races, because quite frankly, they would have had a super easy election. The Senate majority would have been a cakewalk. It would have been a 95-5 advantage for the GOP. The question would be, how many seats are Democrats losing? Not do Democrats lose? And to remind myself of where we are right now, I also want to consistently remind us that we are in a better position for Democrats than they would have envisioned following Glenn Youngkin's victory, which means they have improved from a year off. But not so much. Not improved to an extent that I say they keep the Senate majority, and that's the problem for Democrats, because if they lose at 54-46, sure, it's bad news, but ultimately, any loss is a loss. Any loss of the majority means that nothing is going to happen for the next 2 years, and quite frankly, the ramifications go beyond 2022. They go into 2024, where Democrats have no realistic or viable shot at winning Senate control across the country. So what I see from this Senate forecast is that Democrats, sure, have gotten better from where they were before, but it's still ultimately losses. And just a minor inconvenient error on my end, or on the pollster's end, or on 538's end, would actually make this map back to where it was before. What I mean by that is, we take a look at this, and we take the Republican tool, and we swing Georgia out of the tilt column. This is well within a realistic margin of error of going to the GOP. What happens? It's 52-48. They solidify North Carolina. They solidify Florida, right? They solidify Ohio. They're already winning these states in this circumstance, so not much to talk about there. They're winning Nevada. But let's say Democrats lose to Blake Masters in Arizona. Right now, Blake Masters is actually just now leading in the final round of Emerson College polling for the first time this election cycle. If Arizona goes red, it means the momentum is on the GOP side, and Arizona is turning away from Senator Mark Kelly. That brings the Republicans to 53. Keep in mind, Georgia was tilt blue, well within the margin of error. Arizona was lean blue, well within the margin of error. Same thing in the state of New Hampshire. In this circumstance, Democrats lose 54-46. And God forbid on their end that they lose Colorado, because that map would be 55-45. You fast forward to 2018, Democrats have incumbents in West Virginia, Ohio, Montana, all across the country, and could lose those seats quite frankly easily, given it is a presidential election year. So we could be talking about a map. Realistically, this cycle, Colorado I don't think is realistic. Realistically, this cycle, 54-46, assuming that, or not even assuming, in the event, in a very possible event, that the error is in favor of the GOP, and the error shifts these states ever so slightly to the right. Because New Hampshire, I'm thinking Maggie Hassan wins by 3-4. Mark Kelly wins by 1-2. Raphael Warnock wins by 0.5-1. All it takes is an underestimation on my end for this map to look a lot redder than it already does. On the flip side, if I'm overestimating Republicans, Pennsylvania goes blue. Ohio goes blue. Wisconsin goes blue. Nevada goes blue. And that brings Democrats to 53-47. There was a pundit out there today, I think it might have been Nate Silver or someone, maybe baseball, I'm not entirely sure, who said that we are one polling error away from a Republican landslide and one polling error away from a Democratic landslide. That's the good thing about being at a point where you're in the middle, because Democrats could potentially bank on an error that shifts them up to a severe Senate majority. But Republicans also have that opportunity, and given historical inaccuracies, Republicans are much more likely to be the ones that are severely underpolled when it comes down to these races. Yes, Donald Trump is not on the ballot, and midterm polling data is a lot more accurate than presidential data, but we also might be in a new era of polling, a new era of Republicanism, Democraticism, whatever it might be, and that could be skewing our averages as well. So looking at this 55-49 number, I would count and bet on the GOP if I was in that position, because it means that the 538 forecast that gave Republicans less than a 3% chance at winning the House in 2020, when they almost did, means that I'm much more inclined to believe the number, especially if it's telling me Republicans are ahead. Democrats need to brace for impact. November does not look kind to them. The only thing that I will say that is keeping me at bay from assuming it is going to be a Republican landslide, a polling error in favor of the GOP, is these special elections and some of the polling data out of the states that are telling us the race is still very much competitive, but that the Republican Party still has, in some cases, the slight upper hand. But realistically, I don't know how much I would say I would wait on these special elections or these polls. I still think the GOP is ahead, but there is some other data from before when Republicans were in a similar position in some of these states that were telling us Democrats were outperforming their 2020 numbers. So it's very interesting, very fascinating to say the least. It will be quite an interesting election night. I encourage you to watch my live stream that will be going on election night. I'm going to have some of my friends here from college up on the live stream with me too. But altogether, it will be a fascinating, fascinating evening, and I would highly encourage you to tune in because it's going to be one for the history books, absolutely, in the future of our democracy, the future of the Biden presidency, the future of America. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.